more tax. The government have confirmed that there will be rises of 4.9% on council tax over the next year, although in fact it could go up to 5.99%. These are inflation busting council tax hikes from April 2019, and it's going to include £24 per home potentially to pay for the police. Now, of course, this is a result of the fact that we desperately need more police on the streets, but the government can simply not afford to fund it centrally. So this is their clever ruse in order to fund these extra community police officers. They're running to up taxes via council tax. So analysis actually shows that this rise could actually add £65 to an average bill for a Band D home. Currently, of course, that is £1,671 a year. Now, I say, yes, of course, it's brilliant that we're going to get more police on the streets. That is something that is absolutely necessary, and I fully support this £510 million for police and crime commissioners across England and Wales. But the fact that only £161 million of it will come from the government, I think, is disgusting. It shows that there is a massive problem in terms of what the government is spending our tax money on. Essentially, another tax rise, but doing it via the back door, doing it via council tax, is not something that I believe we want. But what do you think? I'm on 0344 499 1000. You can also text me. Just text the word talk, then your message to 87222. That's 25p plus your normal network rate. And you can tweet me as well at TalkRadio. I've got a poll going on this as well at the TalkRadio Twitter page. Would you be prepared to pay more council tax if it meant being able to fund more police? If you want to vote in that poll, just head to @TalkRadio on Twitter now, and I'll bring you the results after we debate it. So in order to do that, I'm joined on the phone by Harry Fone, who is the grassroots campaign manager at the Taxpayers Alliance, and Robert Palmer, the executive director at Tax Justice UK. Now, Robert, you think it's right for the government to allow council tax to go up by at least 5% from April 2019. Why?
I think we've got a difficult situation. Council tax is a bad tax and it really hits some of the poorest hardest. But central government has slashed the amount of money that they're provided to both the police and local government. So they've sort of left local councils with no option. If local councils want to provide the services that citizens want and deserve and need, including police, we're going to have to pay for it. And if central government isn't willing to cough up more, then the only option is to raise council tax.
Harry, aren't we already paying quite enough tax?
Well, certainly when it comes to council tax, definitely, and you could say the same of income tax. I mean, our research shows that between 1997 and 2017, that council tax has increased by, in real terms, 57% in England. And I think a lot of people are quite aggrieved. They're paying all this extra money every year, and they're not seeing the services delivered as a result. You've got councils now going to fortnightly, even in some cases, monthly bin collections and things like this. And I think people are very much aggrieved that they're not getting what they're paying for, and I completely sympathise with them on that.
I mean, Harry, our tax rates across the board are so much higher than many parts of the Western world. And I genuinely do not believe, and if you look at polling, this bears that out, I do not believe that people are prepared to just simply keep paying more taxes. I mean, we're taxed now on plastic bags. We're taxed now on sugary drinks. This is a conservative government who simply believe the answer to virtually every problem is to introduce a new tax. And what annoys me so much is actually what they should be doing, surely, Robert, is having a serious look at why we have to spend so much money on the NHS. But instead, rather than doing that, they decided to pour more and more money in, which is why the police budget now has to come from council tax, this rise in the police budget.
Yeah, and I mean, there are difficult choices all governments have to make. I mean, over the last 8 years, we've seen central government funding to local governments cut by almost three-quarters. We've got local governments that are going bankrupt. And as Harry points out, local governments aren't able to provide the services that people expect. And I think...
Well, exactly, and surely policing, and that's exactly why the police budget needs to be provided out of central government to allow the council tax to be spent on things, as you say, like running libraries and not moving to fortnightly rubbish collections, because you're right, it's disgusting. Where I live around East London, I mean, honestly, you would think sometimes that you're living in some type of Armageddon. The rubbish just piles up for days.
And that's partly because central government hasn't been providing the money that local government and other bits of government need to run and to function. And I think most people understand that if you want decent public services, someone has to pay for them, and tax is part of that mix. And so what we really need is a bigger conversation about, okay, what type of services do people expect, and how do we fund those in a fair way, and how do we have a tax system that works in a fair way? Because one of the problems with council tax is it's not very progressive. And so, there are going to be a lot of poor people out there who are going to be really angry that they're faced with being asked to pay more tax to pay for public services. So at Tax Justice UK, we want to see a more progressive tax system and government funding public services at the level they need to be able to get the sort of services everyone expects, like decent bin collection, like fixing potholes, like making sure that our libraries stay open and our parks are looked after.
Harry, if you look at it, though, these shock figures about the explosion in violence across England and Wales have been stark. So in the year to June, murder rose 14%, knife crime up by 12%, and robbery up 22%. That meant overall crime levels at a 13-year high. So do you accept that something has to be done in terms of where we get the money from in order to counter this? Is Harry there? I think we've lost Harry. Robert, are you still there?
Yes, I'm still here.
So Robert, you look at those crime figures, they are clearly shocking. Do you accept that something has to be done in terms of local governments coming more to the party?
Yeah, and I mean, local governments will have, in some ways, a greater understanding of local conditions and what local communities need in terms of policing. But ultimately, the kind of heart of the problem is that the government has cut quite a lot of services over the last 8 years, and that has, led to the sorts of increases in crime that we're seeing. And I think if you talk to frontline police officers and people like really understanding what's needed, one of the things they'll say is, look, we can tackle this, but we do need more money and more resources. And I think you pointed out at the beginning, it's unfair that central government is passing the buck to local government. It doesn't really have much choice. They've got to deal. They've got to, play with the cards that are dealt with by central government. And so that's why we need a fairer tax system that raises the sort of money that we need to provide the public services that people expect.
Well, Harry, I wanted to get your view on this. Sorry, we just lost you there for a moment, because, of course, crime, 13-year high. The figures are shocking. Anecdotally, there's so much evidence of crime getting more and more severe across the UK, but the fact that robbery is up by 22% shows there is clearly a need for extra police funding. So the central government simply can't provide it. So do you see any way that it could be fairly passed on, this responsibility to pay for it out of council tax?
Well, I think, the first thing to say is, when it comes to central funding, is that the government is very good at wasting money. The Taxpayers Alliance has long called for reform of spending and the tax system. But if we look at just the spending, for example, you have the Department for International Development sending £14 billion a year on foreign aid. And, we're not looking after our own matters at home. We're still running a budget deficit even after all the years of the Conservative Party claiming that they were going to do away with it. So they do have that challenge in that where are they going to find this money from? But if they eradicate the wasteful spending, as I say, DFID being one of them, Department of Culture, Media and Sport, and also you've got these projects like HS2, which are completely unnecessary and won't benefit the country. If you get rid of this wasteful spending, you can soon find the money that way. But also, if you consider, as you said earlier, we have a tax system now that is so burdensome on people, and the cost of living, and you said, plastic taxes and sugar taxes and all these things.
It's just a tax for everything.
Indeed, and this is a few years ago, the Taxpayers Alliance proposed something called the single income tax, which was designed to create a dynamic, prosperous, fair economy that would actually increase the revenue while making everyone better off. And I think if the government would just adopt something like that and encourage businesses and entrepreneurs and people, and we would be in a much better situation. But unfortunately, as you said, we have a Conservative government that seems to think that raising taxes is the answer to all their problems.
It's a Conservative government also trying to compete with Jeremy Corbyn as well, and they seem to think tax and spend is the right approach. But it's fascinating because if you look at the results of our poll, Harry, would you be prepared to pay more council tax if it meant being able to fund more police? 60% of people saying no extra tax at this point. Of course, you can vote in that poll at TalkRadio. And it is interesting, isn't it, Harry, because people are desperate for increased services, but they don't want to be taxed more. So what's the solution? Because I presume the Taxpayers Alliance actually believe that this Conservative government should be cutting taxes.
Yeah, absolutely. And the thing is, if you look at the councils, and they've all been claiming for years that their budgets are cut to the bone and there's nothing left to cut. But unfortunately, our research disagrees with them. We do something every year called the Town Hall Rich List, looks at the remuneration of council employees earning over £100,000. And there's some quite frankly shocking statistics in there. People who are earning more than the Prime Minister, for example. I think there was someone up in Birmingham who got a payout, including his pension, of about £600,000 one year. And it's not just that, it's things like they take flights for various reasons. They're taking business class and first class flights. And I live in Milton Keynes, and we have a council there that they had £3 million to budget on an office refurbishment. They've gone £9 million over budget, and that's excluding the money they spent housing their staff in private offices while that was going on. So this claim that they're cut to the bone just doesn't tally with what we're seeing. And I think I get emails every day from our supporters just telling me about the numerous amounts of waste going on in their local council. So if they can get rid of the waste, I think they can soon find the money and not need to put council tax up.
Absolutely. That's Harry Fone. He is the grassroots campaign manager at the Taxpayers Alliance.